Welcome to week 2 of the Connection Group Launch Guide. We're talking about the second core value, which is care. Now, care can sometimes get a bad rap because it sounds soft and squishy, or people maybe accuse it of codependency, whatever. Even when you try to define care, sometimes it can be tricky to figure out what exactly does it mean to care about someone. Because some people are really merciful, and when they think about care, they think about emotionally connecting. Other people are like, yeah, I care for you by showing up when you got house projects or yard work to do. When we define care in terms of connection groups, one of our core values, part of health in a connection group, we say care is living out the one another's of the New Testament. Maybe you've heard this term before, the one another's. If you haven't, Google one another's in the New Testament and you'll see a list. I just looked at a list that had 59 one another's. Now, 10 of those were love one another in different places, so I don't know if it's quite that many. But the one another's are this beautiful New Testament expression of what it looks like now that we're part of a church family together. And part of a connection group family is where you express that for each other. Some of the one another's do feel almost soft and squishy, right? Love one another. Wash each other's feet, greet each other with a holy kiss. You don't have to try to apply that in group tonight, that's fine. But the one another's also sometimes are pursuing someone, caring for someone in ways that don't feel soft and squishy. Rebuke one another. You're bearing one another's burdens. Sometimes you're challenging one another to walk in maturity and walk with Jesus. You're building one another up. Care, again, is more than just nice feelings towards other people. It's actually intentionally pursuing their godliness, their maturity, their holiness. Care is living out the one another's of the New Testament. To make this a little more clear, we're going to go to the Bible, Galatians chapter 6. You've got it in your guide. I'm going to grab my Bible and we'll read it together. Galatians chapter 6, verses 1 through 5. We'll see a couple one another's here. Paul's writing to this church, and it's kind of at the end of him talking about the true gospel versus false gospels, all this stuff. He's saying, brothers, if anyone is caught in transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, there it is right there, and so fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself alone and not in his neighbor. For each one will have to bear his own load. Pause this video together. See if you can see at least 3 observations when it comes to what care looks like in this particular passage. Go ahead and pause it. I'll be here when you get back. Here's some of the observations that I've seen from this passage. First off, it's talking to Christians in Christian community. One of the things that we see in the one another's is you can't live the Christian life. You can't do this. You can't obey unless you're in community with other people. That's part of the reason why we have connection groups, for you to actually have a place to be obedient to what the Bible's calling you to. And care in this way is explicitly talking about Christians relating to other Christians. There are ways that we can love the world around us for the sake of Jesus' name, but care especially shows up for other believers, towards other believers. Again, I'm not saying we don't care about the world out there, but this is different in the way that Jesus describes it, in the way the New Testament describes it. So it's you who are spiritual relating to brothers and sisters. Yeah. Another thing we see here is there's a spirit of humility. That definitely says humility. It's probably English, I'm sure. Don't try to read my handwriting. Humility. It says you've got to watch yourself lest you too be tempted. So as we care, as we live out the one another's, we're not coming at another person from a position of superiority, right? We're not coming to someone else and saying, I've got it figured out, you don't, poor you, let me help. But all of us together are dependent on Jesus as we seek to love one another. So that the explicit one is bear one another's burdens. But Paul contrasts that with each one carrying their own load. I'm not going to get into the Greek there. Some people would say these are different weights, whatever. But one of the things we see is it's not all or nothing. There's some wisdom in how we care for each other. There's some discernment of what actually is caring versus what is caring too much. We'll get to too much, too little in just a minute. But I'm going to write wisdom here. You need some wisdom to figure out how to care well. A final observation, and I hope you have more than this too, but is the goal of it is restoration. Restore them in a spirit of gentleness. That's the purpose of this particular care. Restoration to healthy, right relationship with Jesus. We don't want care to become the primary function of a group or where it's only a needs-based thing. It's not a community support group in that way. More than that, we're seeking to all walk in health and maturity towards Jesus. Now, some of us are going to have one-time needs where, hey, I've got a particular financial burden, I've got a health issue, I've got a house issue, whatever, that a group can rally around and help. Others of us are going to have longer-term needs. And as a community, we figure out how do we best help that person meet their needs. And we love care to start in connection group, but if it becomes too much for your group to bear, to continue to bring the whole church into that. So again, the goal isn't just to meet physical needs, financial needs, whatever, but restoration to a healthy relationship with Jesus and maturity there. Okay, let's play the game Too Much, Too Little. We tried this last week, but we're going to take a minute and talk about what does too much of an emphasis on care look like in a group. If your group just went way overboard in trying to live this out, or what does too little look like, feel like, act like? And now again, it might be easier to start with too little. Maybe you've even had experience in a group where someone had needs and those didn't show up. But take a few minutes, pause this video, and talk through together what would too much or too little look like, feel like. How would you know if you walked into a group, man, there's too little care or too much care here? Go ahead and pause the video and we'll come back together in a minute. All right, let's talk about too little and too much of an emphasis on care. Some of the observations maybe you came up with is too little care would again be cold. We talked about that with community a little bit, but if group wasn't a place where you felt like you could bring your needs, it would feel kind of cold and sterile. Maybe people would be guarded. They wouldn't feel like they could trust people to bring the needs that they have or be encouraged and challenged that way. Maybe care would look like or feel like, man, you find out after the fact when someone actually does have needs. So you're constantly surprised by needs. It'd be a bummer if you found out, hey, someone was in the hospital and we didn't find out till a few weeks later they were just kind of gone. Yeah, they didn't show up to group, I don't know, we didn't check up on them. You'd be surprised by situations going on. And I think too little would be, frankly, needs would continue to get bigger. More and more needs would get bigger because they wouldn't be dealt with in terms of the one another's. Some of the one another's are encourage each other, build each other up. If we weren't doing that in connection group, you'd have a bunch of people that aren't built up, that aren't built in their faith and maturing. So too little of an emphasis on care would lead to an immature group. And none of that is a group that I want to be part of. What do you think too much of an emphasis on care looks like, though? If we went way overboard and took it way out of proportion with the other values, what would too much look like? One term that's kind of popular is codependency. Especially as we saw in Galatians, it's, hey, bear one another's burdens, but each carries their own load. If we got rid of that carry your own load thing and in group it was all about how do we meet this person's needs completely, we might start to have a savior complex. As if each person in the group really needs me to be the one to meet their needs or to help them or to whatever. Now again, Jesus uses us, but the goal of this is restoration here. Restoration to a healthy, mature relationship with Jesus. Because our relationship with Jesus is personal even as it's together in a group. I think too much of an emphasis would look like little Bible. The Bible might not hit someone's felt needs, and so we spend a lot of time with prayer requests, and okay, maybe you've done this in group, where it's like, hey, we're gonna have prayer requests, and people spend the next 20 minutes explaining their prayer requests, and we don't have any time to pray. A group might start to feel like that, where every week all we're talking about is, I've got this need, I've got this situation, I've got this going on, whatever, and we don't actually get into the Bible to let God expose our hearts, because our felt needs are kind of trumping all of that. I think too much might look like a warm group, but also a tired group. Man, we'd be warm because we're helping each other out and we're meeting those tough spots in life. We're showing up for each other. But the group might be tired. At a certain point, if all we're doing is trying to play whack-a-mole with situations going on in life, I think we'll be exhausted. And again, when I see too much show up in a group, it's often around urgent situations or needs, and not the other parts of the one another's in terms of encouraging, building up, rebuking, challenging one another. Those parts sometimes get missed when we really go overboard in focusing on care. That's just a brief look at what too much, too little looks like. I'm sure you guys came up with more. Again, we're looking for that sweet spot. What does it look like for us to live this in healthy proportion to the other values? Now, for the rest of group tonight, for the rest of your discussion, I would love for you to answer the discussion questions and process what it looks like for you especially to own care in your group flourishing. How can you take more ownership in your group living out this core value? And some of the cool examples I've heard is, man, when someone's in the hospital, your group going and visiting as much as you can. Or when someone in group is moving, it's not a big blast out to the whole church of, hey, come help, but actually your group shows up for each other. Maybe if someone has a baby, it's you guys organizing a meal train and making that happen. So much good care happens and so much good shepherding happens on the connection group level that even, we'll say kind of on a staff level or a church-wide level, it never gets to that point because you guys are caring well for each other. I think people are encouraged but also challenged well to walk with Jesus. So again, for the rest of your time, keep working through the rest of the discussion questions, and I hope this helps you better live out the care we want your group to have, the one another's of the New Testament.